Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down my week number 11 wide receiver start or sit decisions for the 2024 fantasy football season, going in depth through every single game from Thursday Night Football all the way up until Monday Night Football, telling you guys whether I believe you should start or sit the wide receivers in all games. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 11 wide receiver start or sit decisions for the 2024 fantasy football season. We begin with Thursday Night Football. The left hands up. Who are we? The Commanders at the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, we'll start off with the Eagles. A.J. Brown was on a bit of a dry spell from weeks 8 and 9, not really performing up to snuff, what you're used to for a guy like A.J. Brown, who is a must-start wide receiver every single week. But last week, up against the Dallas Cowboys in Jerry's World, he took that defense on a one-way trip to Pound Town. 5 receptions on 7 targets for 109 yards. A.J. Brown is a must-start top 8 wide receiver weekly, and this matchup is no different. I got him as a locked and loaded top 6 wide receiver for week number 11. Now, Devontae Smith was silenced like the night in which Santa Claus comes last week in a blowout effort by the Eagles. Normally, the Slim Reaper is a guy that you feel very confident in being a top 24 wide receiver, but that just wasn't the case last week up against Dallas. So this week, I do really believe that he is going to bounce back like the Cavs in 2016. I am feeling real nicey about Devontae Smith as a low-end wide receiver too. Now, this is technically a revenge game for Jahan Dotson, but he is about as useful as having Wolverine claws attached to your hands when you're trying to wipe your ass, so there's really no need to play Jahan Dotson even in the revenge game. Terry McLaurin is in the same exact boat as A.J. Brown. Sure, maybe we suck off A.J. Brown a little bit more, but ultimately, Terry McLaurin is also a must-start wide receiver. The Eagles' defense has definitely looked a lot better as per recently, and I will give them their flowers when the flowers are deserved. But because McLaurin has been such a reliable wide receiver too for a majority of the season, I do believe that the matchup here is going to be overruled by Terry's consistency. Last week in a game up against the Steelers where the Commanders' offense wasn't really at its best, Terry McLaurin was the wide receiver 16 with 5 receptions on 6 targets for 113 yards. I could definitely see him doing it yet again, and I believe the Commanders' offense will come out looking a lot stronger this week, and Terry will finish as a low-end wide receiver 1. Now, when it comes to Noah Brown, he has been looking good recently, right? He's seen 6 or more targets in 3 straight games, which is very good for the potential value of Noah Brown going forward. But, and this is a big but, shout out to Layla Starr, I do believe the Eagles will be able to limit Noah Brown's production. Again, this is a defense that has looked a lot more solid as of recently. And again, Noah Brown isn't really the cat's pajamas or anything, so I don't want to be premature and rank him as a start, so I'm going to leave him as a sit. Olamide Zaccheaus, Falcons legend, him and Luke McCaffrey kind of split the wide receiver 3 duties on this team, which makes neither of them startable. Now we move to 1 p.m. on Sunday. Luckily, you don't have to wake up at the ass crack of dawn to watch football in London or Germany or wherever the next overseas game is. We got 1 p.m. in Chicago. Chicago Bears going up against the Green Bay Packers. Now, Jaden Riley-Reed has had his ups and downs all season. He's had 5 of 9 games inside the top 26 and 2 finishes inside the top 2. Last game out prior to the bye week, he was the wide receiver 17 up against the Detroit Lions, going 5 of 6 for 113 yards. Now, the Bears defense actually allows the second fewest amount of points per game to the wide receiver position, so I definitely don't want to sit here and rank Reed too highly, get too high and mighty when it comes to Jaden Reed, but I do think he is deserving of a middle-of-the-road wide receiver 2 to low-end wide receiver 2 play, as the upside is definitely worth the start. Romeo Doubs in super positive matchups, you can definitely get real cute and throw him into your lineup. But up against a rock-solid Bears defense, I don't think you can quantify making really a strong argument for playing Romeo Doubs, so I would leave him on my bench. Now, Christian Watson has gotten 6 or more targets in back-to-back weeks, but really just hasn't been productive this season. He is one of those guys that you are never really surprised if he pops off, if he goes nuclear, if he scores 25 points. No one's sitting there like, wow, who would have known that? Wow, who would have known that Christian Watson could score 25 points, right? Everyone knows that. He is a great player at times. But again, he really is never consistent, never really been that productive this season, so I would leave him on my bench. Now, for the Bears, wiki, DJ Moore, he's a sit. Keenan Allen's a sit. Rome Odunze's a sit. With Caleb Williams playing like Jamarcus Russell back in 2009, DJ Moore has been banished from being a start-worthy player. Even if you think DJ Moore's a great wide receiver, which I do believe, and even with Shane Waldron getting fired, I need to see something with my own 2 eyes when it comes to Caleb Williams' play before I can come remotely close to playing DJ Moore. This man hasn't scored more than 5 or more than 8 points since week fucking 5. It's week 11. Stay clear away, stranger danger when it comes to wiki DJ Moore. Now, Keenan Allen was okay last week as the wide receiver 34, but ultimately, like I said with DJ Moore, until Caleb actually proves he isn't a blind quarterback, none of these Bears wide receivers are startable, including Rome Odunze, who was the wide receiver 60 last week. Next up, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Detroit Lions. Now, the Jaguars defense is on barbecue chicken alert for Amon-Ra St. Brown. They allow the 5th highest amount of points to wide receivers on a per game basis, and I expect Amon-Ra to kick that Jags defense in the mouth. Last week, up against the Texans, he had 6 receptions on 8 targets for 60 yards and a touchdown, which now marks 7 straight games with a touchdown for Mr. Amon-Ra St. Brown. I feel great about a top 6 wide receiver ranking on the week for Mr. ARSB. Jameson Williams, if he was able to get 5 or more targets every single week, then I would be talking up Jameson Williams bigly. I would be banging the drum aggressively for him. But ultimately, his target share, as of recently, has been far from great, right? Over the last 5 games, he's gotten 5 targets last week, 1 before the injury, 4, 2, and 3. That is not a good amount of targets. Now, obviously, when you go up against the Jags in a finger-licking good matchup, shout out to Colonel Sanders, right? You can make a lot with a little. Of course. But do we really want to put a lot of trust in him? Fuck no, baby. So I got him as a low-end wide receiver 3 in the flex range. For Mia Khalifa Raymond, with the return of JMO, he has been banished to getting like a target or less per game, so there's really no need to discuss him any further. He belongs on the waivers. For the Jacksonville Jaguars, I want to sit here and just have some false positivity about Brian Thomas Jr. because I really do believe that the guy is immensely talented. And I believe that even on a bad Jaguars team, he will have the ability to lift up a guy like Mac Jones, right? I want him to be able to do that. But ultimately, when push comes to shove, I think with Mac Jones under center, the Jaguars offense is too fucking heavy to lift up. The Lions defense does allow a boatload of points to wide receivers in fantasy. So if you have the cojones, if you have the balls to start him, it could pay off. But without Trevor Lawrence, I would be staying away. George Parker Washington, the first president of Duval, had 0 targets last week after 6-4 the 2 games prior. With Mystic Mac Jones under center, if I can't play Brian Thomas Jr., you certainly can't play Parker Washington. Gabe Davis is about as reliable as trying to make a cellular call on your phone in the middle of the woods, right? One of these days, he's going to strike back like the Empire in episode 5, But ultimately, you never know when that's going to happen, and he's without Trevor Lawrence, so you got to stay away. Next up, we move into the cold like Minnesota Vikings at the Tennessee Titans. Make sure if you guys have enjoyed thus far to hit that subscribe button down below if you're new, and whether you are new to the channel or not, make sure you leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. Now, Justin Jefferson did have a down game last week because Sam Darnold decided to pass the ball like someone with a blindfold on. He threw 3 picks and had 0 touchdowns in a wet dream spot up against the Jaguars. This week up against the Titans, I do expect Darnold to look better, thus being able to elevate Justin Jefferson some more. He's a clear top 12 wide receiver weekly, and I got him top 6 up against the Titans. For Jordan Addison Ray, he has been pretty consistent this season. Pretty consistently shit. 4 of 7 games outside the top 50, and just 2 games inside of the top 24. The upside is always there for Addison, right? He's a big play upside kind of guy, but as of right now, I don't feel confident labeling him as a start, especially with Sam Darnold looking like Stevie Wonder in the pocket. Now, Jalen Naylor, I barely knew her. With Addison and Hawkinson healthy, he'd be lucky to get 3 targets, so he's a guy that belongs on waivers. For Calvin Ridley, he has seen 8 or more targets in 5 straight games, and last week, he hit the Chargers defense with a vintage prime Mike Tyson level uppercut as the wide receiver 3. Now, personally, I didn't think he'd be able to do it with Will Levis. Honestly, I wrote him off Geno Smith style. I said, you know what? Because it was kind of working with Mason Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer, but it is not going to work with Will Levis. But it did, right? 5 receptions on 9 targets for 84 yards and not 1 but 2 touchdowns. Now, I highly doubt he's going to be able to replicate that because, again, we all know who Will Levis is. He's incredibly shaky, but with the amount of volume he has seen as of recently, I think he does belong inside the top 24 as a low-end wide receiver 2 option. Now, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine scored a touchdown every game from week 6 through 9. Very nice, I like. And the problem was, though, even in those games, with all the touchdowns, he scored just over 12 points once. Last week, he didn't score a touchdown, and he scored 6 points. So even if he does score, I don't expect him to be good enough in terms of the point total for me to actually be confident in playing him. And up against the Vikings defense, I think he's going to get strapped like Angela White in that video with Mia Malkova. So I am definitely leaving him on waivers. And Tyler, yeah, Boyd hasn't caught a pass in 2 weeks. Another guy to leave on the waivers. Next up, we move to the Las Vegas Raiders at the Miami Dolphins. But before we break down this game at the wide receiver position, as well as the rest of the games on Sunday slate and then getting to Monday Night Football, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, hit that subscribe button down below while you're down there. Whether you are new to the channel or not, make sure you leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. And make sure you guys do check out our sponsor, Underdog. Promo code Notorious to claim your free pick. Jalen Hurts, Thursday Night Football, higher than half of a total yard, plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. So you match Jalen Hurts with a player on the Commanders, and if both of your picks hit, you will get 3 times what you put into your pick. I mean, if you put in multiple other picks, they all have to hit, but the payout will be higher. If you're watching this after Thursday Night Football, you're like, Nick, Thursday Night Football already kicked off. And if you use promo code Notorious or click on the link in the video description, you will get another NFL player higher than half a total yard or an NBA player higher than half of a point. So again, sign up with promo code Notorious to get your free pick, plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. So make sure you guys do check that out. So when it comes to the Dolphins versus the Raiders, Tyreek Hill scored his first touchdown since week 1 after getting arrested last week, which was cool, right? Very great, right? Very nice. But he only scored 11.7 PPR points, which kind of just has me fucking pissed off, right? His wrist injury is most likely impacting his play, and the fact that the Rams spammed 2 high safeties all game led to Hill not really being all that useful. I probably sound like a broken record at this point because every single fucking week I tell you, oh, he's gonna bounce back. This is gonna be the week where he pops off. But I really do believe up against the Raiders, this is the game where he breaks off. He's soaring, he's flying like Troy Bolton as a top 12 wide receiver. Now, Jalen waddled away, waddle, till the very next day, dropped a deep ball that hit him right in the chest. It's like if there was a target right in the middle of where his rack would be if he was a female, it hit him right there, right in the tatas, and he dropped it. He didn't catch it, and that had me not feeling good either. Sure. That wouldn't have magically made him score 30 fantasy points, but it definitely it would have helped. And even with Tua, Waddle hasn't been able to find his footing and hasn't scored more than 10 points since week 1. Ultimately, I don't trust Waddle at all, but the matchup here should allow him to be a low-end wide receiver 3/flex type of player. But again, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I love playing Jaylen Waddle this week. For Odell Beckham Jr., he made a clutch catch last week. Round of applause for him as a Dolphins fan. Thank you, Odell. It was awesome, but he's not a real piece of the game plan. We use Tyreek, we use Waddle, we use A-Chain, and Jonnu more than him. With just 5 catches through 5 starts, there is zero reason to even roster him, even if you're in like a 32-man league. Unless you're in a league that gives you points for being Odell Beckham Jr., and then, of course, he would be a league winner. Now, Jacoby Myers, brother of Violet, of course, I don't think Gardner Minshew is good at all. But without Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers has been playing very good. Wide receiver 20 in week 8, wide receiver 19 in week 9 prior to the bye. The Dolphins defense did look good up against the Rams, holding them out of the end zone, but Puka and Cooper Kupp were still able to get theirs in terms of fantasy. I feel like the Raiders will get hammered in the face, hammer-fisted fucking 12-6 or 6-12 elbow. Shout out to John Bones Jones in this game. So they're going to be getting face-fucked here, and they're going to have to throw the ball, which should lead to Myers becoming a solid high-end wide receiver 3, low-end wide receiver 2 type of play. Trey Tucker, with the Dolphins defense actually looking solid. Again, I just don't really, like, who the fuck wants to start Trey Tucker or DJ Turner with Gardner Minshew under center? That's enough said. Next up, we got the Los Angeles Rams at the New England Deflatriots. Now, despite the Dolphins defense holding the Rams out of the end zone, like we just talked about with the Dolphins, both Puka and Kupp had good games, regardless of the fact that neither of them actually scored a touchdown. Nakua was the wide receiver 7 with 9 receptions on 14 targets for 98 yards. And outside of the game where he got ejected for fighting, 5 minutes for fighting up against the Seahawks, he has been a top 15 wide receiver in back-to-back games. I love Nakua, and I feel confident in a top 12 finish out of him. Cooper Kupp was the wide receiver 25 or better in 3 straight games, and a top 18 wide receiver in 2 straight games. We know his standing in this offense. We know him and Matthew Stafford go to breakfast every single morning, so we know he's getting fed all game long. I think the Rams offense will look a lot better than they did last week because, again, they shit the bed. They shit down their leg in that game. They should have played way better than they did. I got Kupp and Puka in the same range. If I had to play one or the other, say I had both of them, and then for some reason you can't play both of them, I would be playing Puka over Kupp. But again, it's by a very, very minute margin. So DeMarcus, go to Marcus, had his Linsanity run from weeks 8 and 9. He scored 2 touchdowns in both games. Nice. Cool, but DeMarcus is always live to have some crazy game like that, right? Because they use a heavy wide receiver 3 sets, or 3 wide receiver sets, I guess is the correct way to say it, right? They use a lot of 3 wide receivers out there. So DeMarcus is on the field a ton, but ultimately, we never really know when you're going to actually want to play him, and with Kupp and Puka healthy, I would just stay away. For the Patriots, even with Demario Douglas being the wide receiver 1 on the Patriots, he really hasn't had great success in fantasy football, despite Drake May playing really well. Once we start seeing Demario put up respectable numbers in back-to-back weeks, maybe Demario could be a league winner. And I'd love to start him. But can you start him right now? Fuck no, baby. For Kayshon Boutte, he's better than his name, right? Kayshon Boutte, you'd think the guy was straight up ass. He's actually been pretty decent. 6 targets in each of the last 3 games. This week facing the Rams, I just don't really see anything that would indicate me risking it and wanting to play him. And if I'm not going to start Douglas or I'm not going to start Boutte, who see a reliable amount of targets, I'm not going to be starting Jalen Polk, who gets like 1 target a game. Next up, we got the Cleveland Browns at the New Orleans Saints. Now, Cedric Wilson has put up 3 straight games inside the top 12, and even in a game up against the Chargers where Jameis looked certifiably awful, Tillman was the wide receiver 12 prior to the bye. 3 touchdowns over that span of 3 games, and going up against the Saints coming out the bye week, Tillman needs to be considered as a high-end wide receiver 2, and if you ranked him as a top 12 wide receiver, while there's so many great names inside the top 12, I wouldn't tell you that's crazy. Sure, 1 game's an outlier. 2 games, it's like, okay, they're really starting to do it. When you put up 3 fucking games in a row as a top 12 wide receiver, you need to get respected. Respect the pouch. Respect it. Respect Cedric Tillman. Jerry Jeudy. Now, is Jerry Jeudy the highest upside bet of the week? Of course not. but he's seen 8 or more targets in both games with Jameis and has seen 12 or more points in both games. If you're looking for that safety wrap, that condom around your team, get you 12 points, maybe 15 points. He's a safe option at wide receiver 3, a low-end wide receiver 3 for Judy, but the upside is definitely limited because of how many weapons they have on this team. Elijah Moore has seen 9 or more targets in back-to-back games, but to me, it does really feel like Tillman and Judy are the much safer options. Wide receiver 60 last week with 9 targets, the last time out because they had the bye last week. In deeper leagues, you might consider playing him because, the Jameis factor, right? Jameis, when he's on. It's on. It's fucking smack down, brother. Hulkamaniacs, right? He is elbow dropping the defense. He's a real American, right? He's going crazy. But, we also know Jameis can have the meltdown, right? So Elijah Moore just doesn't feel like the smart play. Now, when it comes to Marquez Valdez-Scantling, he was the wide receiver 2 last week, right? Jumping with joy like Elon Musk every time you see him take a picture where he basically is jumping like Mario. He's trying to smash the block to get the thing out of it. You know what I'm talking about, right? So he was the wide receiver 2 last week up against Atlanta, right? You're jumping for joy if for some reason you started MVS, right? One person across the United States of America, maybe MVS's fucking dad played him, right? If he has a dad, I actually literally have no idea. So hopefully he does, because that would sound mean if I just said that. So one of his family members, right? 3 receptions on 3 targets for 109 yards and 2 touchdowns. This feels like the classic example of people like sprinting to the waiver wire like it's Black Friday back in the day. Remember when it was Black Friday and it wasn't like, oh, you just shop online, or, oh, we'll walk nicely through Walmart or Target, right? Back in the day, dude, people would die. You would you'd be like, oh, I want the new flat screen TV, and you might die. It was a survival of the fittest, right? And you're running out there for MVS, pick him up, you're like, ooh, look at that, one great game. And then ultimately, he's a one-hit wonder and a colossal bust. Now, I do believe that he's worthy of a waiver wire ad, because if he could put some consistency up, then yeah, fine, start him. But when you score 2 touchdowns on 3 fucking targets, that's bound to go down. Mason Tipton didn't see a single target last week with the arrival of MVS. There's no need to start him, or Kelvin Austin Jr. sounds like a guy that you draft in Madden 3 years into your franchise mode. Next up, we got the Indianapolis Colts. This is our Colts. This is our team. We bleed blue. Going up against the New York Jumbo Jets. Now, I'm surprised that Shane Steichen made the move to put Anthony Richardson back as the quarterback number 1. I thought he was going to lose the locker room. I thought that he was going to get fired for switching to Joe Flacco, but he made the right decision. Look, I get Anthony Richardson might be a bust. I understand. That's not a crazy thought process. Not. It really isn't, based on what we've seen. But when guys like Daniel fucking Jones get 70 plus starts in the NFL and they're still trucking it out there, give the guy a chance. Give him a chance, and they're doing that, right? And that's great for Anthony Richardson, and it's great for Jonathan Taylor. But you want to know who it's not great for? Josh Downs, who goes from being a reliable wide receiver 2 to falling into the desperation start range at the wide receiver position. Downs is a great player and will command a fuck ton of targets, but the actual value of his targets will not be the greatest with Anthony Richardson. So the upside here is there. It's always going to be there with Josh Downs, but the floor is in the basement, so he's more of a wide receiver 3/flex type of player. Michael Pittman Jr. seems like he will play, as he practiced in full today on Wednesday, and if he does, I'm still not starting him. Just like I won't start Alec Pierce or Donnie Mitchell. We know AR has that soft spot for Pierce in his heart, but I don't think he's actually reliable enough to actually play. For the Jets, despite the Jets getting Cleveland steamered by the Cardinals in Arizona, Garrett Wilson was able to keep his head above water and not be a complete disaster as the wide receiver 36. Prior to last week, he was on a hot streak. 5 straight games inside the top 24, and 3 of 5 games inside the top 5. I do definitely worry that the Jets might wave the white flag. I do definitely worry that the Jets might have given up. But in this wet dream spot, they won't be able to be sat. You just can't do it. You can't argue against it. The wet dream spot is too good. They will show up offensively, and people will buy back into the Jets just for them to let them down again. So going up against the Colts, Garrett Wilson is a low-end wide receiver one for me. Now, Davante Adams has been getting peppered with targets over the last 2 games. Last week, he had 13. The week prior, he had 11. Last week, he turned his 13 targets into 6 catches for 31 yards. It honestly just feels like Adams and Rodgers have lost all of their chemistry. So many times in that game, there was so many examples, countless examples, where Adams is butt booty naked wide open. He is wide open. And the ball comes out wrong. The ball comes late. Maybe Adams runs the wrong route. Maybe it came out too early. Who fucking knows? Maybe he wasn't on the red line, right? He's now dealing with an illness and a wrist injury. That is something to monitor. And going forward, we just have to operate with Wilson being the better fantasy option than Davante Adams. Out of the two, I don't feel very confident right now, but something tells me people are going to go panic mode on Davante Adams. I think he's going to go nuclear as like a low-end wide receiver 1 or high-end wide receiver 2. Xavier Gibson would be lucky to see a target. No reason to even discuss him. Next up, we got the Baltimore Ravens at the Pittsburgh Steelers. And speaking of red line, we got Mike Williams in this game. So for the Baltimore Ravens, despite the Ravens and Bengals game on Thursday Night Football being the shootout of the ages, a back and forth rock'em sock'em robots matchup, just a beautiful, fun time. Zero defense being played. Zay Flowers, he had 4 catches on 6 targets for 34 yards. Not good, right? That sucks. It does. But based on what we've seen this season, there is strong belief on my end that he will be able to bounce back as at least a wide receiver 2. So I got him as a high-end wide receiver 2 on the week. I'm not panicking too hard. For the rest of the Ravens, we got Rashad Master Bateman, and he had the Cincinnati Bengals defense looking silly, right? 6 receptions on 8 targets for 54 yards and a touchdown. But we've been saying this for years about Bateman. A broken clock is right twice a day. With Bateman, that just always seems to be the case, right? He has a good game, then he disappears, vanishes. John Cena, you can't see me. And he might show up again, right? But there's just no consistency. And with Deontay Johnson trying to get ramped up more and more and more, it throws an even bigger wrench into things. Now, I'm not playing Deontay Johnson or Bateman. Deontay Johnson has had just 2 total targets over the last 2 games. It's a revenge game for him. But I don't know how much the uptick is going to be coming his way. For George Pickens and the Steelers, George Pickens was just balls deep in the Commanders' defense. It's really that simple. He had 5 receptions on 7 targets for 91 yards and a touchdown as the wide receiver 5 with Mr. Unlimited under center. Pickens has went from a high upside deep shot from fucking half court to a reliable wide receiver 2 asset up against the Ravens defense that just got really diddled by the Bengals offense. I could see Pickens finishing inside the top 12 yet again. Since the Ravens allowed the highest amount of points to the wide receiver position on a per game basis, Pickens is a locked and loaded top 8 wide receiver in my rankings. Mike Williams scored a touchdown last week, and it was the game winner for the Pittsburgh Steelers up against the Commanders, and that was great to see. And then he took that shot against Aaron Rodgers on Instagram, which was also very, very funny, because it seems like at this point, a lot of people are just tired of his nonsense, right? When it comes to Aaron Rodgers. Now, Mike Dubb only saw 1 target last week, which was the 32-yard catch for the touchdown. So I think he is a great waiver ad, right? A guy you hold on to. See what he does this week. You see what he keeps doing. You see as the workload increases, the snap share increases, how he plays. But until we really see him get ramped up, he's just been there for a week at this point, 2 weeks now. I don't trust him just yet. Now, Calvin Austin is one of those guys, the Speedy Gonzalez's, right? The real fast guy that randomly out of nowhere, you blink and you look at the end of the game and maybe you didn't see the Steelers game too much. You weren't watching. You were, hanging out with your wife or something like a fucking loser on Sunday instead of watching 7 hours of commercial-free football, right? You're sitting there and, you're not watching the game and, you have kids. Watching the kids. Come on, you should be watching the game. This is all jokes. If you are with your family on Sunday, all respect to you, right? Everyone, can't watch every single game. But what I'm saying is, like, he's one of those guys where you just forgot to watch the Steelers game, right? It's not on your radar. You check your score, and Calvin Austin sitting on your bench, which he's not sitting on anyone's bench, right? But he scores, he gets 4 catches on 4 targets. He has 120 yards and a touchdown. Are you surprised? No, because that's what he does. He does that every once in a while. but with Mike Williams in town, there's just no reason to risk it. Next up, we got the Atlanta Falcons at the Denver Broncos, the first game at 4 p.m. on Sunday. Drizzy Drake London has looked better than Jessica Alba in Into the Blue last week up against the New Orleans Saints, right? He has 8 receptions on 12 targets for 97 yards. Now, I do have some reservations in terms of banging the drum aggressively for him this week, as he might get the PS2, the Patrick Surtain treatment, which could lead to a disaster class performance, but I do got him as a high-end wide receiver too, strictly because I think the volume will be there for Darnell. Here comes the Mooney. He's been a top 19 wide receiver in 3 straight with 85+ yards in all games and a touchdown in 2 out of 3 games. He has been cooking during Kirkvember, and I do expect him to be able to keep up this play this week up against Denver last week. He did keep up the play last week. This week, up against Denver, in Mile High as a low-end wide receiver too. When it comes to Ray McCloud, he's another one of these guys, right? He's buried down the target hierarchy. One of these days, you fucking blink and the guy has a touchdown. But he only sees like 4 targets, and he's seen 4 fewer in 5 straight games, with him being buried behind Bijan, Kyle Pitts, Darnell, here comes the Mooney, Drizzy Drake London. You just can't make any argument to play him. For the Denver Broncos, back-to-back Michael Jordan 96-97 weeks as the wide receiver 6 for Courtland Sutton, which is just impressive because it's not just like 2 back-to-back top 12 performances. Like, oh, you were the wide receiver 6 twice, which is impressive, even though it wasn't the wide receiver 1, right? Through those games, 3 games, so he's had 2 games straight, wide receiver 6, 3 games straight with 9 or more targets. And with Courtland Sutton catching fire like his name was Katniss Everdeen in a matchup up against the defense that allows the 7th most amount of points per game to the wide receiver position in the Falcons, I feel great about a top 24 finish here. And due to the matchup, I got him as a top 18 wide receiver on the week. Then we've got the other guys, the ragtag group of dudes, the XFL legends down here, Devon Vell and Bo Nix's friend from Oregon, Troy Franklin. Now, Vell was the wide receiver 21 last week, 4 for 4 like he was at Wendy's for 39 yards and a touchdown, but he just doesn't seem to get enough targets to play him, especially since Sutton sucks in targets like his name was Kirby. Troy Franklin hadn't scored more than 10 points in 3 weeks and has just 2 games with over 10 points, so we're going to sit him even up against the Falcons. Next up, we got the Seattle Seahawks at the San Francisco 49ers. Now, DK Metcalf practiced today on Wednesday for the first time in forever, the first time in weeks as he's been dealing with a knee injury. This is something to monitor, but when Metcalf plays, you play him. He's a hit or miss type of guy, right? There's games where he's hot, there's games where he's ice cold, but ultimately, the upside of DK Metcalf completely outweighs the downside. Against SF, this is going to be a game where they're throwing in Santa Clara. They're going to be down. They're going to have to be throwing. So DK is a middle-of-the-road wide receiver 2 for me. For JSN, prior to the bye week, he had his career game. He was the wide receiver 1 with 7 receptions on 13 targets for 180 yards and not 1, but 2 tugs. With Metcalf back, it's time to, holster JSN a little bit, right? Just temper your expectations a little bit. Without Metcalf, we might be talking about JSN as this mid to low end wide receiver 2, like a top 18, 24-ish guy. But with Metcalf, he's more of a middle of the road wide receiver 3. Fine, but again, not as exciting. Or Tyler Lockett in my pocket skirt. We say this every week, so I'm just going to breeze past it, right? Give you the abridged version. Is that the word? Give you the too long, didn't read. Tyler Lockett, he gets a lot of targets, but he doesn't do a lot with them. He makes a lot of business decisions. He catches the ball, and he falls over. He catches the ball near sideline. Instead of trying to make a guy miss, instead of trying to hit the fucking juju on that beat, juke past the guy, instead of trying to hurdle a guy like Saquon Barkley, just steps out of bounds. He plays things safe. And that's good for him because he's an unk. He's an old bastard. But it's not good for fantasy. So while he's like a good NFL player still at the wide receiver position, like he's a great wide receiver 3, even at his age, he's not good for fantasy. Deebo Samuel and the San Francisco 49ers. Deebo had 5 catches on 6 targets for 62 yards last week. He also had 3 carries for 14 yards in Tampa. We all know who Deebo is. He's basically just like DK Metcalf. He is a high-end wide receiver option that doesn't have a lot of safety to him. He's far from a condom wrap around your team, but ultimately, without Ayuk, we should be seeing a lot more consistency, and up against the Seahawks, Deebo should be able to strike up a high-end wide receiver 2 performance. Juwan Jennings went off last week, wide receiver 15. He had 7 receptions on 11 targets, 7 of 11. Shout out to the Slurpee at 7-11 for 93 yards. As long as Brock Purdy continues on his path of playing quite well, I just say Tom Brady. Did I say Tom Brady? Like the streamers that always say like chat Chat, was that a W or an L, chat? Poggers! Okay, but what I was really going to say is, did I say fucking Tom Brady? The fact that I just called Brock Purdy Tom Brady, maybe I didn't. I just thought I did. I hope I didn't. Because people are like, Nick, you think Brock Purdy's Tom Brady just because he got drafted? Just because he was Mr. Irrelevant doesn't mean he's Tom Brady, Nick. I know. Okay, but Brock Purdy, he's playing quite well. He's playing very good. So I would continue to expect Juwan Jennings to be able to put up a reliable high-end wide receiver 3/flex option type of game, even with the emergence of Slick Ricky Pearsall. Now, Ricky was the wide receiver 13 last week, 4 of 6 for 73 yards and a touchdown. It was awesome. The dude got fucking shot a couple of months ago, right? So that's cool. But, and this is a big but, shout out to Carly Gray, with CMC getting more and more healthy, with them having Debo, Juwan Jennings, Kittle, there's kind of too many cooks in the kitchen here for me to actually want to play Ricky right now. Next up, we got the game of the week, right? The game everyone's talking about. Everyone, your mother, your grandma, your fucking great-grandpa, he's talking about this game, the Kansas City Chiefs at the no one circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. Talking about this all week. Chiefs in the playoffs against the Bills, it's a knockout punch. You know, you fucked if you're the Bills. In the regular season, Bills kind of own the Chiefs. Very, very interesting dichotomy here. So DeAndre Hopkins pulled down last week up against the Broncos, which I don't think anyone should be surprised with. I said last week I wouldn't be surprised if he did because he was going up against Surtain. Now, I think the game against the Bills could become a shootout here, and D-Hop should be able to bounce back. He was the wide receiver 33 last week. D-Hop really just kind of looks like a new man here. Seems like he got the shit of the Titans off of his shoe, or his cleats, I guess, and he's been playing a lot better. So I feel good about a fringe top 20-ish showing here for Xavier Worthy. I will say this every single week about Xavier Worthy, so I'm sorry if you've heard this spiel before, but Worthy is a 2 to 4 target per game type of guy. He's another one of these guys that's super flash, right? He's the Flash. He's Barry Allen, right? He's the kind of guy that could get 3 catches for 100+ yards and a touchdown. But those games are a dime a dozen, right? They aren't going to happen all the time. And he's been a wide receiver 3, top 30 type of guy just twice. 9 games played, twice inside the top 30. Not what you're looking for. Even up against the Bills, I wouldn't feel confident enough to roll him out there. Now, it seems like Juju might be able to suit up. And even with Mahomes under center, I don't think you're actually going to be wanting to play him either. So with D-Hop there, I'm sitting him down. For the Buffalo Bills, Khalil, Shakira, oh baby, when you talk like that, has been all reliable over the last 4 games, 7 or more targets in 4 straight games, and as long as he gets that amount of targets again, he should be a safe bet to be a wide receiver 3 this week, and he is a great flex in my opinion. Amari Cooper missed back-to-back games with the wrist injury and was limited in practice on Wednesday. Amari Cooper's debut with the Bills had him in the end zone as the wide receiver 14. He then followed that up with the steaming pile of dog shit as the wide receiver 111. There is no safety in Amari Cooper. But if you need to play him, he is one of the last guys I would consider as a start, but the upside is obviously going to be there. For Curtis Samuel, without Amari, Curtis Samuel actually tried to fill the crevice in that offense that Amari Cooper leaves. He had 4 catches on 8 targets for 35 yards. I've never liked Curtis Samuel, and I will never like Curtis Samuel in fantasy if you can't play him, even if Amari misses, because they also love Mac Hollins, who in my opinion is better than Curtis Samuel. Next game we move to, cause you waited all day for Sunday night, Cincinnati Bengals at the Los Angeles Chargers. Bar Chase scored 55 points last week on Thursday Night Football in Baltimore against the Ravens. If you started Jamar Chase and lost, I feel so bad for you, because that should be basically impossible. 11 receptions on 17 targets for 264 yards and 3 touchdowns. He scored 4 touchdowns in one game that my main man Tyreek Hill has all season. Against the Chargers defense, I expect Chase to put belt to ass here as a top 5 wide receiver. Titty boy T. Higgins hasn't played since week 7 with his quad injury, and it is far from a guarantee that he actually plays on Sunday night. When healthy, we know who Higgins is, right? He is a great wide receiver. He's an elite wide receiver 2 at the NFL level, in my opinion. So you're going to play him in the wide receiver 2 range. But again, I have zero confidence that he actually suits up, because it seems like for weeks he was coming back. He just never came back. Andre Yoshi Voss hasn't done anything since week 3, so we're going to stay away, turn the other cheek on him. For the Chargers, Lad has been solid all season. Now, I don't think he deserves a parade across Los Angeles as this amazing wide receiver, right? but he's been fine. A fine fantasy asset. Last week, he only had 2 targets, but prior to that, he had 6 straight games with 6 or more targets. Against a Swiss cheese Bengals defense, Ladd is a rock-solid high-end wide receiver 3. Quentin Johnson has scored in back-to-back games, but Ladd does appear to be the number 1 option in terms of targets on the team. And when Quentin Johnson typically gets 4 or 5, that's okay. It's okay, right? You'd prefer to have Ladd's target share for QJ, but it's okay. Matchup here is great. Up against the Bengals, I'm willing to risk it for the biscuit here as a low-end wide receiver 3/flex play. Joshua Palmer's clearly behind Ladd and QJ on the target totem pole, and they like to run the ball. Not really getting 4 targets a game, so he's kind of no bueno. You're not going to be playing him. Next up, we got the Houston Texans at the Dallas Cowboys. A couple weeks ago, you asked me about this game. Even though the Cowboys are down astronomical, sure, this is a fun game. Now, 2 thumbs down. Not very nice, as they would say. So Nico Collins, it seems like he should play this week, as they ultimately made the game time decision last week to hold him out. When Nico Collins plays, you play him. It's that simple. 2 + 2, you play Nico Collins, right? The Dallas defense is as shriveled up as your fucking wee-wee when you get into an unheated pool at night. So I believe that when Nico Collins is back, I believe that he's a guy that you will sit here and just blatantly say he's taking the Cowboys to Pound Town. He's a top 8 wide receiver. That easy. Hank Dell has had back-to-back games with 9 targets, but we should see that decrease with Nico Collins back. But again, honestly, I really believe with Nico Collins back, that's going to help out Tank Dell because he's now going to be facing softer coverage. I don't love Dell by any means, but he's a high upside wide receiver 3 again because the Cowboys defense reeks to high heaven in the fringe wide receiver 30 range. John Mechie, I've always been a big fan of him, especially following his story. It was beautiful to see him score a touchdown, and it was awesome. He was the wide receiver 8 against Detroit, right? But going forward with Nico back, the fun story sadly has come to a close, but I will still be rooting for him, and I hope you guys are as well. So, CeeDee Lamb for the Dallas Cowboys, considering Cooper Rush threw for 45 yards last week. 45 yards he threw. He threw for 45. 45 yards. It is a miracle, like when the USA beat Russia, right, in hockey, that Lamb even scored 8 fantasy. I know that's not great, but it's a miracle, right? Lamb was 6 of 10 for 21 yards and 1 rush for 3 yards against the Eagles. Lamb is an amazing player. We all know that, right? I don't need to suck the guy off metaphorically for you to know that. But, and this is a big but, shout out to J-Lo, with Rush under center, there isn't much I could say to convince you to play him inside the top 12. Now, I do think that Rush is better than what we saw last week, but with the Texans absolutely pantsing Jared Goff last week and having him look like a straight-up fucking buffoon, looking like a fool with your pants on the ground and your hat turned sideways, pants in the on the ground, talking with your pants on the ground and your hat turned sideways. Shout out to that guy from American Idol. I am very, very, very nervous about CeeDee Lamb. I don't have the balls. I don't have the cojones to sit him, but he's definitely a low-end wide receiver 2 for me. Jalen Tolbert with Dak, you could talk to Nick, I got to play Jalen Tolbert. Go ahead. But with CeeDee Lamb, you got to be smoking that ayahuasca with Aaron Rodgers to be playing him. And then Kevontae Turpin, that obviously means you're going to be sitting him as well. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you didn't enjoy, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below like it owes you some money. Hopefully Jake Paul could hit Tyson with that. I mean, Tyson could hit Jake Paul with that, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think Jake Paul is going to knock out Mike Tyson, and it's going to be very, very, very sad. But I hope Iron Mike hits him with that shit. Boom! Right to the face. Pow! Right in the kisser. Hit that subscribe button like it owes you some money. Leave a like on today's video. Help me out a ton. Check out one of the videos on your screen if you haven't seen them already. Check out Underdog. Promo code Notorious to get your free pick, plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. I love you guys more than you'll ever know. Hope you have a great one. And as always, good boy!